everybody. I'm Elaine Petrocelli, and it is my absolute thrill to be here tonight to introduce our author. I was telling my colleagues back in the green room that I'm a little more nervous tonight introducing our author than I was when I introduced Salman Rushdie, who came with security. But this is such a thrill. Melissa Cistaro is such an amazing talent, and to think that this woman works at Book Passage, we are just so blessed. I remember when she first tried to work at Book Passage, it was not very easy. It was kind of like trying to convert to Judaism. She kept having to ask over and over. And eventually our good friend Calvin said, "Hey, can you introduce authors?" She has now introduced over 200 ecstatic authors. Every single one of them feels just a connection to Book Passage and with Melissa. And I noticed in the green room that Melissa was signing tons of books that have been ordered on the internet. And a lot of them were from authors she's introduced. And it just made me so happy. But most of all, a lot of people apply to work at Book Passage, and many of them are here tonight. Melissa didn't do the usual application because there's nothing usual about Melissa. Melissa wrote an essay about why she wanted to be part of Book Passage. And when I read that essay, I remembered why I like to be part of Book Passage. It was so inspiring. And she has inspired me now for 3 beautiful years. And she happened to mention that she was working on a book. And then one day I heard she has an agent. And wonderful, oh my goodness, it's Lori, my God, it's great. Then we heard she had a publisher. And then she let me read the manuscript. And I didn't know what to expect. What do you do when your colleague's written a book? What if you don't like it? I was a little worried about it, and then I opened it, and from the very first sentence, this book is mesmerizing. I do have to warn you that it will break your heart in places. You will love certain people who are in the book, some of whom are in the audience tonight. I won't embarrass them. You will wonder why did this happen? How could this woman who loved her children go away? How could this be? You will know these people. You will have surprises. And most of all, for weeks and months after you read Pieces of My Mother, you will be thinking about it. It will come back to you in important and unimportant parts of your day. This to me is a mark of a truly great book. So I am so honored to be able to introduce you to Melissa Cistaro.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Elaine, thank you for that beautiful introduction. I just have immense gratitude for where I work here at Book Passage, and for each and every one of you. Like, you all need to wear gold stars. Thank you for coming out. So many great faces from many parts of my life. And I have the honor of working with these incredibly talented and creative people here. So I like to say that I have a dream job. And I want to tell a quick story about Book Passage. Before I worked at Book Passage, I did come and do a reading here. I was part of an anthology, and there was maybe about 20 people in the audience, and authors read. And I so loved being here and standing up here and standing up for the work we had done on the anthology. And when the night was ending, I said, I never want this night to end. And guess what? It didn't. I ended up working at Book Passage. And there are a few people that I definitely need to acknowledge here this evening. My lovely agent, Lori Fox, who I met right here at Book Passage. My brother Eden, who never asked to be in a memoir. And my dad, who is really the hero of this story. And I have to tell you, it was not an easy book for him to read. As children, when we're growing up, as parents, we don't know what our children are feeling or thinking unless they grow up and write a memoir. So, Dad, I'm sorry, and I love you. Also, my husband Anthony and my children Dominic, Bella, and Gianmarco. I have to thank you for the thousands of hours that you sacrificed while I was out writing and writing and writing. In fact, my daughter Bella was 4 when I started this book. She is now 17. So, what is it about this story that took me so long to write? Well, I had a unique relationship with my mom. And when my brothers and I were very young, our mom walked out. And we did see her about once a year, sometimes twice a year. And the story I wrote is really about that childhood of growing up without a mom and how that shaped me as a parent. And I set the story during the last 6 days I spent with my mom before she died. And it was during that time, during those 6 days, that I came across a folder. And in my mom's handwriting, it said, "Letters never sent." And those letters became part of the narrative. And I love having my mom's voice in the book and her words, because she was a wonderful, creative, free-spirited woman. She just really struggled with being a mom. And these letters that I have, and I brought some of them, you can take a look at them. They are the most valuable thing she left for me. Whenever I am missing her, thinking about her, I have access to her very authentic voice and her words, and that means so much to me to have her words. I'm going to read something. I will be brief. After watching lots of authors up here, I know when an author is reading too long. So what I'm going to do is, the book is divided up into chapters of now and then. So now are the childhood pieces, and then, now is when I was with my mother when she was ill, and the then pieces are the childhood pieces. So I'm going to read a piece that was when I was around 7 or 8 years old, and it's called All Kinds of Flowers. My dad lets me drop handfuls. Gosh, you know what? I need to get my other glasses. Not very smooth of me, but then I'm a switchback. My dad lets me drop handfuls of tiny brown seeds into the earth outside of our big yellow house. The soil in our garden is dark, strong-smelling, and full of pale worms. I drop my seeds carefully, one by one, even though my dad says to scatter them more quickly. He reminds me that some of them will sprout, but not all. I cover them cautiously so as not to upset the particular arrangement of my seeds. For as long as I can remember, our garden has always been a vegetable garden. Every summer we have rows of corn, cucumbers, zucchini, red lettuce, and pole beans. This year, I have begged my dad to put in some flowers other than the same old yellow marigolds that are only planted to distract the bugs. He agreed and let me pick 5 packets of flower seeds from the gardening store. I chose Shasta daisies, snapdragons, zinnias, impatiens, and blue forget-me-nots. Dad, where can we plant the flowers? He looks at the seed packets I have chosen, then looks around the garden for some open space. He squints in the sun as he reads the directions on the back of the flat packet. Okay, he says, just so you know, some of these are annuals and some are perennials. What does that mean? He holds up 2 packets. These are annuals. They bloom once and then they die. These are perennials, he says, holding up the other packets. They will come in the spring or summer, then go away and come back once a year. I think about this. Sort of like Mom, I say, pushing the lettuce seeds down into the dark soil. I keep my head down, afraid to see his face, but I can tell he's looking at me as I smooth out the dirt with my hands. The silence doesn't feel right. It's also like the lilacs, I say, to break the quiet between us. Those come back every Easter. Yes, like the lilacs, he says at last. One year, my mom came when the lilacs bloomed. Another time, she came when the corn and lemon cucumbers were ripe. We never saw her in fall. Fall is the back-to-school time. The garden begins to thin out and the squash leaves turn yellow and crisp. We don't see her in December or at Christmas time. The garden is always empty during those cold months. As I lay out the seed packets on the ground in front of me, I also think about the wildflowers on our back hill. How every spring the bright orange California poppies come back, as do the lupines, the bluebonnets, the buttercups, and the small purple ones that no one seems to know the name of. Now I know that my mom is the perennial type who visits and blooms once a year. When her petals begin to wilt, she hitchhikes out of town and we don't know when we will see her next. I want to tell her that someday I will bloom too. So my mom came back and in our teenage years, for a brief time, tried to live in the Bay Area and wasn't able to stay, and she ended up fleeing in the middle of the night. And this is a letter that she wrote me and sent, actually. It's written on butcher paper. She was living with a meat cutter at the time. But I found a letter that was also written around that time that she did not send. And she called me some nicknames. One of them was Lou, so this is addressed to Lou. And I'm closer to my teen years in this letter. Oh, Lou, it is agony without you. May this separation go quickly by so that we can get on with our lives together. Your wonderful letter filled me with equal amounts of longing, pride, and loving. What a pony. How about what a kid? And with so little time left to be a kid, especially when your very own mother compels you to deal with situations as disturbing as ours. I am very proud of you, Melissa. You seem to be meeting the fact of our being apart with great strength. I just pray that in overcoming the pain, you have not had to close off your emotional self, that you are keeping in touch with your soul. May it never be too painful for you to look inside and to share all that you find within. There is so much beauty in you, it would be selfish to lock it away. And the beauty includes any pain or anger. All things must have balance. So when I think about this journey that I've been on with writing this book, I feel a lot like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, in that I've gone on this marvelous, frightening, and magical journey. And what I was looking for was always inside of me. I was trying to get back home. And for me, that meant writing this book. I think that's almost all I have to say. But I would love to answer any questions about writing, book selling, my family, my story. Because I have written a memoir, I feel a little unclothed, but and I know from introducing authors, there's this awkward silence. Andy, thank you.
Actually, it has to do with what you were just talking about, the fact that you're exposing your emotions in your life. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about what you're anticipating over the next few months and how this feels to you.
It feels a little strange and surreal still. I have this fantastic publisher who is really supporting this book, and they're sending me all over to talk about this book. And so for that, I'm just hugely grateful, because I was perfectly happy to put some books in the back of my car and, tell people about it when I could. I just feel grateful over and over. It was a story that I felt I didn't really have a choice to not tell. I tried, and it just kept pulling me back. And I started the story as fiction because I really didn't want to claim the story, but I was always writing my own story, so eventually I had to kind of claim that. So going out on the road tomorrow, Denver, Nashville, back to Denver. I was never expecting this. I wrote the story because I needed to tell the story. And yes, it was important for me to get it. I wanted to publish it. I have my grandmother's journals in my desk at home. I have my mother's letters. This is not where I wanted my story to live. I wanted to share it. And so I have. Yes?
I'm sure it's probably in the book, which I will read, but did you ever have a chance to ask your mom, like, how could you make that decision to leave your own children?
Well, that's a good question. It's part of the story and part of the struggle I had during those last 6 days. I think I waited too long, and I didn't have a type of relationship with my mom where I felt we could just get down to the real honest emotions. There was a lot of protection and a lot of caution. So I wish that I could have been more brave later in her life and our lives and gotten some answers I was looking for. But for me, I was processing it through writing it and trying to craft the story of it. Yes.
Were there harder parts of the book to write than others?
Harder parts to write the book than others, absolutely. Some of the pieces in the book I wrote when my daughter was 4. Some of them came out through the editing process. Actually, the editing process was really hard because I had to go and kind of dig even deeper, and I thought I'd already dug deep, and I had to really go down the hole, the tunnel, and it was hard. And, you know, in the end, it's this amazing feeling of like, wow, so I worked on this for 12 years and everything I have to say fits in here. How is that possible? Yeah. Yes, William.
The few letters that did make it to you over the years, do you remember the impact on you as a young girl? Did you feel resentful or grateful? Or both?
Oh, for the letters?
Yeah, when the letters came to you as a young girl.
Yeah.
Do you remember the impact on you?
I loved that my mother wrote letters, and I wrote back, and I adored my mother growing up. As a child, I mean, there was the longing, but I loved her deeply. I didn't understand her, and some of the visits that I talk about in the book, there's a lot of unpredictable things that happen, and that I wish were different. But I was really always very grateful to have that contact with her when I could see her and when I got those letters. Yes?
So was your dad present throughout your life, and did he help you to understand your mom at all during your upbringing?
Yeah. Was my dad present during my life? He's here. And he is an incredible person. So my dad raised 3 young kids, and we would have live-ins and sitters when he was working. But it was a tough job. I mean, it was not easy, and my brothers were a little bit of it wasn't that common. You know, there's a little bit of a stigma with a mother who leaves her family. A father, it's more common. Many of us have fathers who left a family, and my dad really stepped up to the plate and did an awesome job raising us. Yes, sorry.
Can you talk a little bit about this, how you structured the book, and whether it was something that you came up with originally or that kind of evolved as you went along?
So the question is about structure, how I structured the book. I started writing the childhood stories when my kids were young, and I knew that my mom was ill, and I knew that she was going to be leaving again. And I was trying to understand that. But the structure of the now and then, it didn't come until after she died. And I had to go back to those days, those very powerful 6 days that I spent with her, and remember how hard that was. And it felt natural that I was there, and I was remembering so much, and I was confronted with so much. And then when I found the letters, I was afraid of them. I didn't know if I wanted to read a file called Letters Never Sent. And I read them very carefully and very cautiously. I just didn't know what was going to come out of that. But I did read them, and I grieved and struggled a lot during that time. But the structure seems to work. People that have read the book feel like it's a nice back and forth. Yes?
Did you have an epiphany about your own mother as part of this process?
Oh, good question. Did I have an epiphany about my own mothering in this process? Man, is it hard to be a mother? It just is hard. And there's so much joy. I certainly, it never, even though, the book talks about, and it's on the jacket, would Melissa Cistaro leave her family, her children? No. I loved my children fiercely. I never thought about leaving them, but I was afraid of where I had come from. So my mother, the word that came into my head was, did I have a leaving gene? something in me that could surface because I didn't understand why or how my mom left. I also came from a line of women. So on my father's side, my grandmother, Rita, was dropped off at a convent to be raised by the nuns at age 2.5. So I came on this side, then I've got my mother's mother, who really struggled with being a mother, and that's very evident in her journals I have. And she died quite young, and so I felt surrounded by mothers who struggled. And what kind of mother was I, and what kind of mother would I be? So it was more of an underlying fear. Yes.
Do you think I guess I haven't read the book, but it sounds like your mother may have had a drinking problem.
My mother loved to drink. And she was not mentally ill in any way, and that's a question that's come up. Was there some mental illness? She was brilliant. She was bright. She was creative. She did suffer from some depression, and I think that tied in with the alcohol. Eventually, it is alcohol that killed her. Yes, John Marco.
Did your mom do everything with you?
I wish she could have, but she wasn't able to. And I realized the reason you might be asking that, John Marco, is because it is really hard for me, and it's how the book kind of opens. It's hard for me to tell my children that my mother was capable of leaving me. It was so painful, and I realized I really haven't had a lot of conversations with you, John Marco, but we got a lot to talk about. It's not quite bedtime story time. But yes, Pamela.
You said that you felt you didn't ask your mother enough questions and came to that the conversation you might have had a little too late. So I'm wondering if you felt you learned anything or gained some insight through the process of writing the book.
Absolutely. Like I said, I needed to write the book. I needed to write it and write it and write it and write it until I felt that I could craft a story from it. And the honest truth is I could keep writing this same book for another 10 years. It will never be exactly how I want it. It'll never be exactly good enough but I was so happy to have an opportunity to let it go. I mean, even when I was looking for something to read, I was like crossing out words, like that word shouldn't be in there. It's just an extra word. So, it's, yes, it's been, I think any writing is healing. I know Linda had asked about sort of this cathartic shift.
Well, my question was if you felt you gained some knowledge or some insight that you didn't have maybe as you started writing, but in the process of writing.
Oh, in the process.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Something occurred to you, or you got something that you maybe wouldn't have if you hadn't been writing.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the process, I was still reading some journals and letters. In fact, I honestly haven't read them all of her journals. And sometimes I'll go back and I'll read a little bit. So yes, I was constantly, not learning anything plot-wise about her, but just going deeper and deeper to understanding her. And really what I came away with was, I came to love and appreciate my mother for the woman she was, as opposed to the mother she was supposed to be or might have been. And that came through writing and through the process. Mm-hmm. Christine?
Hi. Did she ever have the chance to meet your own kids, and what kind of grandmother was she?
Oh, that's a complicated question. She met Dominic and Bella. In fact, my son Dominic did a report. Is that right? Did you do a report on Grandma she was really looking forward to having grandchildren. She says, I'm going to make it up when the grandchildren come. And she really wasn't able to do that because I think she came down one holiday and I think she was with Anthony in the car, and she says, well, I'm going to teach Dominic a few things this weekend. He needs some discipline. She didn't, it was hard for her to be a loving, doting grandmother. She just didn't have the experience. Yeah, so it was tough for her. But they did get to meet her, and we'll have to have a conversation about how much they remember. And of course, John Marco did not get to meet her. Yes, Elaine?
Would you talk about the beautiful fairy that is in your garden here?
Yes. So, this is the good fairy. And she's not the original good fairy that we had in our house growing up, but she's a fairy that I found on eBay. But she was a very special object in our house growing up. My father was an antique dealer, and he would bring treasures home, and they just appear in the house. And I remember the first time I met the good fairy, and I write about her in the book because there's something about her open arms and like reaching out, and I could relate to her. She just seemed so happy and free, and I think I talk about her like I wish I could just reach out beyond the borders of the big yellow house. And it says the good fairy on below her, and I keep her on my desk now. She's sort of a source of inspiration to me. And I talk a lot about objects and antiques and treasures in the book because I had my room, which was my place, and I invented games in there, and I invented a game called the International Room Cleaning Competition. And in that game, I would, the judges would come and I'd show them my goods and how I arranged things. And I had a lot of emphasis on treasures. They kind of stood in sometimes for people that weren't there. So yes, the treasures played a big part in growing up. Yes, Danielle?
I'm wondering if there's a story with the cake on display on the snack table if that's related.
Okay, so there's some cake mix boxes on the back table. If anyone's read the book, they probably know why. So, one sec, Joanna. So Johanna, lovely Johanna, asked me, she said, well, I'm thinking about your event. She said, is there any special food that you had as a child? And I said, Johanna, my mom didn't cook for us. And I said, well, I did. Well, I'm not going to get into that part of the story. So, so I said, well, we did when my brothers and I were young, and there's a story in the book about my father worked for Duncan Hines. Is that right, Duncan? Procter & Gamble, Duncan Hines cake. So there was a very vivid memory. We're very, very young, and that's part of the thing that happened when I was writing this book, is I have access to a lot of early memories. So my brothers and I went down, my brother shakes, under the house, and there were these boxes of cake mix, probably giveaways, or I don't know, maybe they had bugs, whatever. We got into those cake box mixes, and my brother Jamie was like, you want to get some cake, guys? I was like, yeah. And so we went down, and there they were raw mix, and but we ate them. They were delicious. So if anyone would like, please take home a box of cake mix. It's really good for the first few bites. Like that powder and. Yes, Lori.
I find the quality of your mother's letters striking, the quality of her prose as well, and I was curious about if you feel it's in the DNA or if you hear your voice in her letters or vice versa.
Yeah, so the question is about my mother's letters and her writing and her style and her voice. And she's a wonderful writer. I loved reading her work and her journals and these letters. And I'd like to think that I could write as well as her. But I will tell you one thing that I noticed my mother does a lot of dashes when she writes. And I've always been that way. I don't know, I can't quite make a period. It has to be a dash. And she was very much like that. And but also that I could tell how important writing was to her, and that she did it so much. And you could tell a lot of it's that stream of consciousness, maybe a little bit of LSD mixed in there for her. But yes, I really love, I feel like I could learn from reading my mother's letters about being a writer. But yes, I think there's something, hopefully I got the writing gene instead of the leaving gene. Yes, Marcia Heckman.
When you finished, Melissa, did you forgive her?
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is a book about forgiveness and about compassion. I set out to write this story not as like, this is my mom, she was this person who did this, that, and that. It was really, how can I understand who she was and how I could understand myself in the context of our family. So a great deal of forgiveness. I don't agree with everything that happened, or I don't, love everything that happened, but I can stand up here and say, I had a wonderful mother.
Thank you for sharing your story, Melissa, with all of us,
Yes.
and for sharing the reading your mother's letter, and that was spoken. I think there's a continuum in things you've sort of probably late at night while you were writing this in year 9 or something. There were probably moments where you heard her voice and thought, wow, I've been given this gift to speak. Mm-hmm. And given the caliber of the writing and how much it's motivated you, do you have any sense of why she wouldn't have sent some of those letters to you during the time?
Okay, so the question is about why my mother wouldn't have sent the letters. It is mysterious. She kept the letters. Some of these were, decades old. And she wrote on the folder, letters never sent. It's in her handwriting. Why she chose to keep those letters, I don't know if I'll ever really know. And that was part of what I talked about being afraid. Were these not for me? Should I not have them? Or was there something I didn't want to know? But I don't know. I don't know, and I'm so grateful to have them, and I do feel like I had to steal them. I was afraid to ask permission, and even as ill as my mom was at the time that I found the letters, I was afraid she was going to come up and rise up and say, those aren't for you. These are my personal documents. So I felt very ambivalent about having the letters, and also very few of the letters are dated with a year. Almost none of them. It'll say, this one says December 11th. And that goes back to maybe what you were asking Lori about, inheriting traits. I'm really bad with dates too, and like piecing it together, but I had to really kind of construct the letters, which order they were in. By circumstance, I could try and, like a big quilt, make sense of them, but some of them are still sort of mysterious to me.
Do you understand, after writing this, do you understand better why your mom was the way she was? Did you go back and do like her upbringing, how she was raised, or do you have a better understanding now of why she was the way she was?
Do I have a better understanding of why my mother was the way she was?
How she got that way.
How she got that way. This will always be my story. I will always still be thinking about the different reasons and whys. But I think you actually have to read the book to really understand just the journey of that. Because I was looking for an aha moment, a cathartic moment when my mom was ill. Did I find closure? I found something different than closure, and that's what a lot of what the book explores. Yes, Casa.
This was a very personal memoir. You've taken 12 years to write it. There were sections of it that read like a thriller.
Oh, read like a thriller, everyone.
Writing was very smooth and all basically very polished. And I'm wondering if you're going to continue writing. Are you going to maybe branch out into other genres?
Am I going to continue writing? I don't think I can stop. But I think I did my memoir. I think I've covered that. I think, I would love to explore some different things, although I'm kind of fascinated with here she is. So I'm a little bit fascinated with this woman. She is my grandmother. This is my mother's mother. And she is the one who also, struggled and had a really rough life. I have her journals. I don't know that I would write it as a memoir, but I would like to explore who she was. And I have a feeling, there might be a mother in the story. Yes. Thrillers I haven't considered, but you never know. Maybe take it. Suki. Yes. So, as I mentioned, this was a very hard book for my father to read. There's very personal details about much of our family. And he's been hugely supportive and gracious. And at one point, I needed to turn in my final draft. And my dad said, well, I have some notes. And I said, okay, we should probably talk about those because I got to turn in the last draft. And he said, so there's a story in the book where there's some drinking going on. And he said, well, I didn't drink rum and Coke. It was rum and tonic. And I said, Dad, it was rum and Coke. So we had this conversation about, tonic versus Coke. And I said, if you want me to change that, I am happy to change that if you think it will make a difference. And he said, no, I guess it's okay. And I know he had more questions, but he left it at that. My brother, Eden, was the second person that was the hardest to give it to me because he had some struggles. And I texted him and I said, I just, how are you doing? What's going on? Do you want to talk about the book? And he called me up and he said, you didn't tell me you were going to dig up all that crap about our family. And I just had this sinking moment of like, oh no. And then he said, oh, I'm just giving you a hard time. So and my other brother just, he's kind of read some early work and he said, you just tell it like it is. And so I've had just tremendous love and support from my family, and I am so grateful for that because it is a very personal story, and it's tough. Maybe I can take like 1 or 2 more questions. Yes.
What was your father's take on why your mother left? Did he have his own theory that you were discussing it? I came in late, I don't know if you covered that part already, but I came in about maybe 10 minutes too late, 10 minutes late. And I was just wondering, briefly.
Dad, do you want to write a memoir? Well, I don't know. I think it is such a complex, it was such a complex situation. There were multiple and many reasons. And as much as I was looking, and my dad probably was looking for some like solid answers, things are messy and we don't always understand people and their actions. I know that when my mom was ill, my dad said, I wish that she was able to make some amends, to talk, say some apologies, and she just wasn't able to. It just was too hard for her. So that's that. Yeah, there was a lot left unsaid. All right, we're winding it. Nikki Holman.
Melissa, I know this book is going to be a huge success, and all I keep thinking of is who do you want to play you in the movie? And your brothers, they're going to be hot guys too.
Good question.
You think about it.
Yeah, I know, and people keep asking me that. I think Tom, he's always saying like, yeah, you got to get this to Julia Roberts, you got to get it to Jennifer. So, it's a funny thing with that whole like book to movie. I mean, in introducing so many authors here, it's so rare for that to actually happen. And when you're writing a book, you're not really thinking about who's going to play my family. They are your family, and yeah, if you have any connections, with any of those gals, yeah, I don't know, I can't quite go there. I have to let Lori, my agent, take on offers for that.
I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Melissa, you're amazing.
Oh my gosh, well, I have to thank each and every soul here. This is as good as it could possibly be. I could not be more happy. And quickly, so Crane Stationery donated stationery for me to give out at the reading. So I am handing you a piece of stationery with a book with the sentiment of, is there someone that you know that could use a letter, and will you send it? So when you come up with your books, make sure I give you a piece of stationery, and please take swag on the way out.
Amazing.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah, because I asked him about dinner. They must have gone like after school or something. So I said, are you coming for dinner? Oh, wait, he didn't have 7:30. He entered a contest? Okay, well, he was supposed to get out early and he wasn't home, so I thought, I better text him and see if he's coming for dinner because I was waiting for this. And he said, oh, I'm good. I'm not real hungry. And I said, did you go out to lunch or something? And he had.
Yeah. I think this contest, I won a nominee right on behalf of the school. So Nick wrote an essay, and he was one of 5 people in the state of California that won.
That is so good.
I don't know how many people. So I have helped him out. He's asked me to read some of his essays and that sort of thing. Now this essay, I don't know.
He's a good writing voice.
He's a pretty good writer.
read some of these. Send me the one who won the award for about me. I wonder how long it took him to write.
Here's buddy.
You know what I mean?
So I got you a lot and
that's like baseball. I'm looking at the next play. I'm looking over the.
yeah,
So I want a picture. To send to my mom. Okay. She's not seen you guys in ages. That's what I wanted her and her friend to take it of us. So happy for her success. She's going to be successful. Oh, Bella's got Nick to do her hair differently. Seems like she's a daughter. Is that her husband in the Tennessee? Yeah, he's an actor. I've seen him before. Voice. I love his voice. It's funny, everyone in this room has a story. Everyone. You know, you think about everyone's family, you know. You have to write a story about why they say you don't write your memoirs, and you're like, even just for yourself. Yeah. You're always, you keep a journal. I do. I don't even reading those right now. I really don't. I know you're the private. Yeah, well, that's how I am. Never wrote a memoir. Dominique. Yes. No, you got what did you ask?
There are no more pie chips. No, I have a t-shirt, and then this is the last one. But then what is it again?
Don't you want to say hello to him? Here, Paul, why don't you get him?
We want the two glamorous.
No, I want you to be in there.
Well, what glamour girls first?
No, I only take one picture.
Every day is my lucky day with them.
It's the same picture. Flash took it again. Good. The lighting here's not great, but that's fine.
Yeah, overhead fluorescence.
That's the least flattering light for anybody. You always have that. Oh gosh, I know. And we're very picky about our lighting. So Marissa, you have to write your memoir with me too. You don't want to. You don't. You live in the now. I know you're a child. Who knows that? Right.
Hey, Sri, are you out here?
Talks about what it was on the table.
Yeah. So, like, what's your earliest childhood memory? It's not from watching a movie of yourself.
The youngest I was.
What was it?
I think kindergarten.
So, did you go to preschool?
Back then we didn't go to preschool.
Yeah, I went to preschool. So, do you remember not going to preschool? Not going to kindergarten? Do you remember being home alone and not going to kindergarten?
No, I don't.
No memories at all?
I don't.
As far as back you can think of as I was in kindergarten.
I think so, Paul. I have a further memory, but it's just a very like I remember just little clips. Yeah. We had lived in this class long time. Well, I wasn't in school. So, and I remember like playing with my sister. We had like a little toy that we could roll down. And the hall, and then I kissed her.
So I remember preschool. I remember because there was a preschool right near Stonestown.
School helps us remember the teacher, the kids in the class.
And I
but
remember
at home one day feels like another. That Mary up there? I thought that maybe you would somehow go to the champagne that door.
No, it didn't. I'm not.
took the orange shirt on. Oh, okay, yeah. I'm sorry.
She did. Brother was right here.
He's way in the back row. I see him
And now
back
he's
there.
standing in the truck. He got like a peach and white.
Oh, let's go say hi to
There you go.
yeah. I want to know, did she write the brothers any letters? Yeah, I don't know. Does it say it in the book? Did the brothers get some great letters? We should take that. Well, I think the letters was to the family, maybe. I think she said
The letters were to her. I don't know.
I don't know.
If she wrote any letters to.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Well, we can ask her.
We can ask them actually.
Let's go to the, I want to ask that question. Let's go out. I don't want to embarrass the brother because he's sitting right there and he didn't want any attention. How do we get out of here? Can we go back that way?
So, let's say you're going to leave this first day?